Hello and welcome. All this week we've been bringing you the voices of young people from different backgrounds and regions around the world. Today our conversation focuses on the concerns and hopes of a group of young Americans, all of whom are Muslim. What makes them unique is that they're trying to bridge differences and lessen discrimination in post-9/11 America. I want to welcome you all to the program. And I'll ask you all a variety of questions, but Abbas, if I could start with you and ask, how difficult is it to be a Muslim in America nowadays?
I would say the difficulty is less with practicing religion and more with having people understand sort of the inspirations for why we practice our faith, the way in which it informs our life, how it works as a lifestyle and not just as just a faith but a way of life. And I don't find it to be too difficult, but I think that misunderstandings and ignorance have kind of run rampant in recent times.
Sarah, is it any different being a woman and Muslim? You know, obviously if you're wearing a hijab, it's more easy to identify you.
Well, yes, of course. I actually have started wearing the hijab only a month ago, and I was treated completely differently when I didn't wear the hijab. I wasn't looked at as a Middle Eastern or a Muslim Sarah. I was more just like Sarah from Jordan, and she's in the US. But then after I started wearing the hijab, my classmates, some teachers, some friends, you know, had these expressions that why would she do that, or what changed her, or is she the same person? Nadia,
do you feel fully integrated into American society? Do you feel that you can live the American dream, for example?
I think the whole question about integration is it's funny because I was born here, so when people ask you, oh, do you feel integrated? It's like, well, what does that mean? I speak English, it's my first language. I grew up playing softball, so that's always, I mean, I feel like that question itself is what makes you feel like, wait, am I, you know, when people ask you that, but.
A very valid point, but I mean, considering how Muslims are thought of post 9/11, in many cases there is suspicion in societies. If you stand out as a Muslim, how do you feel you are, how much of a part of society do you feel?
I feel very much a part of society, but I don't know if that's because on college campuses, we're kind of in a position of privilege with people who are open-minded, but just recently with Islamofascism Week and that at GW there was an event where they put up these posters. I forgot what they looked like. Yeah, check it out online. They had like a diagram of what a Muslim looked. They were actually very effective, really good marketing. But like, do you hate Islam? So do we. Is that what it was called?
So it was very anti-Islamic.
Yes, that's coming so close to home. It's cause for concern.
Zaki, if I could ask you, I mean, post 9/11, did you feel your life or your sort of situation in society among your friends changed?
Actually, I don't think so. I know that's the common assumption. It's always, you know, friends ask me, even when I go overseas, people always ask me, you know, how does it feel to be oppressed as an American now in a post 9/11 world? And I don't know what it is, but I don't feel that general sentiment. I don't feel like I'm suddenly being targeted and suddenly being, you know, picked out of a group of friends. To me, it seems the same atmosphere as it was beforehand.
But it would be different if you wore hijab.
It would definitely be different.
You can see the male-female experience as well. Allah, if I could, yeah, go on. You wanted to add something here.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's also, a product of the fact that we live in Northern Virginia, a fairly diverse location. I know friends of mine who lived in Alabama or like other southern areas here in the States had more difficult times. I mean, certainly hate crimes increased and a lot of, I guess, just backlash from various members of the community. And just like Abbas was mentioning, the hardest part, I think, is just that aura of misunderstanding and ignorance that permeates what Islam is and who Muslims are.
Now, who do you feel the onus, who should bear the onus of actually changing things? I mean, is it that the government, the authorities could be doing more?
Changing
the attitudes and the negativity?
I think as a lover of anthropology, we always look at individuals as being agents of their society. And so I think the onus lies on everybody. Certainly we are all players in this field, and it's not just a matter of increasing understanding about Islam, but also, you know, multiculturalism and interfaith relations and, you know, what gets people to tick or what are people passionate about in terms of causes and issues. I definitely feel that we all have a role to play in our own like limited capacity, and that this shouldn't be a lone endeavor. We should be partnering with other institutions, nonprofits, NGOs, government.
Now, interestingly enough, I know all of you are pretty active in trying to engage and to bridge the gap, and you've been very, very much involved in trying to promote a more positive, attitude towards Muslims, as young American Muslims. We had a chance to speak with Dan Sutherland, who heads the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Homeland Security, and he said that, although it was much underreported in the media, the American Muslim community has really done quite a bit to help build the bridges and dialogue between Muslims and non-Muslims. Now, one area that he said that young American Muslims could be more, more participatory in is the area of public service. And let's listen to what he had to say.
I think the one area where we have been pushing more is for people, young people from these communities to agree to join the federal government in public service, to take jobs as lawyers, accountants, FBI agents, immigration officials. So that's the one area I think we're really trying to encourage people is the government has an open door. We really want people from these communities to come and join public service. That's one big area I think we can make improvements in.
Sarah, what do you think about the idea of that, going into U.S. public service, whether it's immigration or, even the FBI?
I think it's a great idea because honestly, a familiar face to to reduce the gap between two cultures is very important. And when we are trying to reduce the gap, Middle Eastern community would be looking at a Middle Eastern agent or a Middle Eastern, public servant, and it will look more familiar to them. They will feel closer to the government.
Bas, what your feeling on that?
Well, I guess my feelings are mixed. I definitely see the value in participation in the government by people from a variety of backgrounds. However, I think it needs to go beyond simply having numbers or having tokens within certain government agencies. I think it goes further, and there has to be, at the same time with the participation of American Muslims, I think you also have to have the hand reaching out and understanding and appreciation and cooperation on the part of the government towards the communities, because you can see sort of where that division lies. There seems to be a bit of a rift. And that needs to be healed, I think. It's very important.
Nadia, earlier you were saying, oh, sorry, Ala, you want to add something?
Sure. I just wanted to add to that. I think I completely agree. I also have mixed feelings. I think it's important that we as Muslims, and we just as citizens of whatever country it is that we live in, my parents were political exiles, so coming here and having the opportunity to participate civically, politically, this is a privilege that we should all try to exercise. And I think expanding public service, community service, whatever it is, and just participating in your society. I'm actually involved in an organization called Muslim Public Service Network, which has been running for the past 14 years, and it gathers university and graduate students from around the nation to assume internships here in DC, either with government posts or with think tanks, media, advocacy, working on a variety of topics, and then coming back home, it's like a girl's house and a guy's house, to a curriculum that really forces them and stimulates them to think about their role as a minority community here in the States and strategize ways in which you can be more effective, strategize ways to participate in coalition building. So I definitely agree with that sentiment.
Well, I was going to ask you, Nadia, you'd mentioned at one point about, see how differently you might be treated if you wear a hijab. And I wonder, when you look at that kind of request from Dan Sutherland to take part more in what the American authorities are doing in trying to build the gaps and build the bridges between the gaps, how do you feel about that, taking part in public service? And to what extent, is it important for you to be able to express your religion without any, obviously without any kind of judgment in that kind of situation?
Yeah, basically, there was a lot of tension at DHS roundtable over if we are going to join the government, we don't want to be implicated in the government's policy. So we don't want to be in positions where we're, ratting on other Muslims and Americans, and that it could be, and depending on what the administration's like, no one wants to be seen as an Uncle Tom.
Did you feel that was the approach, though, or was it genuinely an outreach?
I think it was nice to get a face on the government, that now we're meeting real people. So it wasn't, I always thought of the government, I thought about Mr. Smith and the Matrix. So it was nice to actually, so breaking the stereotypes both ways, that these are real people and they just want to do a good job and they want to know more. So I think it was a good initiative and more needs to be done.
Saki, how do you feel about the outreach that's being put out, that's what's out there basically?
I think my experience this summer has definitely, improved my image of how the government cares about the Muslim community. But I don't see the solution as being to assimilate, to become part of the government, to get jobs. I don't see that as being the final solution. I think we need to continue to have dialogues and discussions between our communities and between the government, but on on more natural terms. So it's not just, you know, the cream of the crop, like the most active, the most intellectual, most young Muslims coming to the government. They need to go and do real in-depth grassroots communication with the communities themselves. And I think that will go a long way to being more, you know, sincere and genuine.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, all of you have engaged in your suggestions at the DHS, Department of Homeland Security Roundtable. A lot of good suggestions were put forward, and it seems that they were listening as well, because I know, again, Dan Sutherland said that one thing that came out of that was the term moderate Muslim was one that was generally disapproved of, because it suggested that, you know, being a traditional or more, you know, visibly religious Muslim might be read the wrong way. Now, this is what he had to say about, you know, some of the ideas.
The term moderate seems to imply that that it's good for the government to work with people who are moderate in their religion. But one of the most important things that this group of people said to us is, we are very religious, and the religion helps us to be great citizens. And we don't, and this is a point we've made over and over since that time, in every context we can, there's no reason to be afraid of people who are religious. It is good for people to be religious. And so we need to use terms like mainstream, traditional, and other terms like that, which this group recommended.
Abbas, what do you think is currently, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about Islam?
I would say the way in which it informs our lives, and the level to which people think it might exclude us from participating in American society, I think is really the most problematic misconception that people have about Islam in the US as well as in other countries which are predominantly non-Muslim. And in fact, like we all said this summer, and as I think Dan recognized, that our religion can in fact help us to be publicly active, whether or not we're actually in the government itself, as well as allowing us to affect change sort of on an advocacy level, on a participatory level, in different ways. And I think Dan talking about different terms is important. One thing I brought up this summer was the idea that being conservative isn't a crime. I may not be conservative, but I am not only okay, but appreciate those who choose to live their religious tradition as they see fit. And so I think that choosing not to engage a certain population because they may be more conservative is problematic, because they are part of this community.
Then how, Sarah, then how would you separate, for example, the misconceptions, you know, the more conservative, as Abbas is saying, the more conservative Muslims from those who are considered extremist? For example, it's scary how, you know, a percentage of young people, I think it's about 20%, believe that there is some justification in suicide bombing, for example, to make a point. How do you separate extremism from conservatism?
Well, extremism sometimes, not only in religion but in any act you do, can lead to crime, can lead to many negative acts. And those who do that, I mean, from the general concept of religion, not specifically Islam, but we all know that religions are supposed to bring peace and supposed to make us better people. So those who are conservative, who conserve their traditions or follow their religion and practice, they are supposed to be good citizens in terms of religion is supposed to make you a better person. And that should be completely separated from who commits a crime. And if extremists commit a crime, then that's not necessarily because they are religious they did it, it's because they are extremists in their thought and the way they go about things.
Allah, have you followed the hijab debate that's taken place in different countries like France and so on? Have you had and Britain now, there's talk about that. Have you kept up with that?
Here and there.
Yeah, because I wonder, you know, in what's happening in some parts of the world, the hijab is seen as a symbol either of defiance, and not just religious, you know, conservatism and so on. There's a feeling that it makes a point beyond being just a religious value.
Right.
So, in terms of the way it's accepted in the U.S., how do you think? How can it be accepted here without being seen as making a point?
Wow, that's a.
I mean, in the sense that, what have you encountered in terms of the way people react to you because you cover your hair?
Oh, I mean, I've just gotten a lot of curiosity, if anything. You know, I've been fortunate in that I haven't gotten any kind of backlash, but then again, I live in Northern Virginia, a really diverse area where there's a lot of color, right? I mean, I remember this one time, like after 9/11, I was at the shoe store and this woman was like, you know, I watch a lot of Fox News, but I'm just really confused, and by the look of it, like, you're Muslim, and can you just tell me a little bit more about it? And so, if anything, it's definitely been a tool of sparking conversation, and I just think what really matters is how you carry yourself in society, and just, you know, extending a smile and not being very stoic and just non-friendly. I think that kind of demeanor definitely has an influence to the way people interact or receive you.
Did you want to add something to that, Nadia?
Yeah,
Sarah.
actually, regarding hijab, I think the biggest misconception that people have about it is they look at it as it puts women down. So people not necessarily are angry with me or afraid of me because I'm wearing a hijab because I may be a terrorist or anything like that, but they are feeling sorry for me sometimes because, oh, your culture is forcing you to do that. What do men have to do instead? So I think that's the biggest curiosity, that what is hijab and why do you wear it, and are you free to choose, and how does it like elevate or put women's status down?
Nadia, one thing that's come also into debate recently is the role of mosques and whether they should be in politics, and the issue of perhaps hate literature in Islamic schools and so on. How do you view that debate? Should there be any kind of mix between the politics and the religion?
You mean in terms of what mosques are educating?
Yeah, should mosques have a say in the sort of political positioning of Muslims?
Well, I think part of the problem that we're having now is that there's a crisis of authority in Islam, especially when you have, in America, who do we take our fatwas from? Do we take our fatwas from overseas, or do we take them from homegrown scholars? And so I think there is a movement in America right now that we need to have scholars that are trained in America and understand this context in order for them to be issuing religious edicts for us.
I basically think one area of the way mosques can be a resource for people is political participation, not necessarily saying that we have to support one ticket or one candidate, but encouraging political pluralism, as well as having things. I mean, I never had this at my mosque growing up, and I wish I had, but voter registration drives, increasing political participation, because we talk about being antagonized or oppressed, but at the same time there is an onus on individuals to choose to get into politics. And if people are coming to the mosque and it's sort of an anchor for our community, it can be a source of starting that engagement in the political process.
Alaa, you were saying that you wanted to add something on this.
Sure, I just wanted to expand on the role of the mosque here in America, actually, because it's not just a place, it's not just a spiritual, religious haven or territory, but rather it's more of a community center. And so here in the United States, I mean, families go to mosques not only to attend like religious services, but you also have your youth groups, and then you have your community service type of projects and other type of events with some like faith groups and whatnot. So I think it's just important to emphasize that, and therefore the importance of encouraging political participation.
Zaki, give us, to wrap this up, give us a suggestion what you think could be the next steps. How can the young American Muslim community engage more with, the authorities, where perhaps there are gaps, and perhaps what could be done to help your situation?
I think the best place to start is in your own community, just getting involved in your local community and expanding beyond just, what happens in the Muslim community, it tends to get very isolated, where all religious activity tends to just take place at the mosque. People come for weekends and they just do religious prayers and they leave. The mosque needs to become more of a hub of activity and more of a gateway into the rest of the community. So youth need to take up that effort and start being involved more with their community at large.
All right, well, thank you very much for all your thoughts here. There is obviously so much more to debate, and we always run out of time, but thanks for being with us. Thank you. And thank you for joining us too. Don't forget, if you have any thoughts about pressing issues around the world, just send your emails to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk is next.